It is exactly 4:13. Present are Chief of Police Andy Greenwood, PRC Officer Kathy Lee, Sergeant Spielman from the Standards Department, Commissioner Ramsey, and myself, Commissioner Perezvelez. And we have a caucus. Is there any public quorum? I gotta get that straight. There is any public comment?
Yes, I guess there is. Hi, everyone. Tracy Risenberg from Open Privacy. I'm looking forward to this conversation. I just found out in the nick of time you guys had scheduled this extra special meeting, so I'm glad that I was able to come. I thought we were going to have this meeting at the beginning of September, so an adjustment to realize that I have to come here. I guess with regard to this policy, there are a couple of specific suggestions on a letter that I assume that you all have, but I just wanted to kind of pay attention to the mild case of mission creep that it seems like we might be experiencing. And that happens and it's natural, but it's also important that we be aware of it and call it what it is and make sure that it's really what we want as a city. When these license plate readers were bought in November of 2017, I have a copy of the staff report at the city council meeting where the contract was approved. I believe it's November 17th, 2017. There was a lot of language both in the staff report and in the private and in the council conversation that followed that very specifically talked about the use of these for parking enforcement. There was a mention of scufflaws and stolen cars. There was no mention of any other law enforcement function whatsoever. And in fact, in response to community comments, were some very strong assertions made that in fact these were parking enforcement tools, and that's why we were buying them. So I just want to highlight that that is the basis on which they were brought into the city, and that, you know, that our written policies should be consistent with sort of the general understandings that were made to the council and to the public at the time of purchase. And if we're changing that, we should be explicit and clear that we are doing so and that it is a change. So I'll just put that out as kind of a general public comment, and I look forward to your conversation.
Thank you so much. Christine, are you doing public comment as well?
Yeah. Hello, Christine Schwartz. I do all the videos. I understand what you said, and I just wanted to mention that if a licensed reader were to pick up, say, somebody who had just committed a crime somewhere and they're looking for somebody, a stolen car or something, that we would think to use it, not ignore it. I don't know, that's just common sense to me. I don't think that's too out of the bounds of reasonability, but that's pretty much all I have to enter. Thanks.
Thank you. Any questions on the agenda? Easy, are you okay with the way it is? 302.
Yes.
So Chief, we can jump right in on,
Actually,
yeah, go
can I
ahead.
just ask, so because of my meeting schedule today, I haven't had a chance to talk to Sergeant Spielman, so,
Okay.
and it was a late breaking switch where I would come. So this red line is following, these are changes made as a result of the last meeting that you had that dealt with this, correct? Or maybe, I don't know if maybe Rico had done them.
I think it might have been, it may have been Rico.
Okay. Because I just want to make sure I'm on the same page about like, the evolution of the document. So,
Okay. I think one of the ones that you had sent me, you sent me a whole set.
If
Email.
this is what I sent you, when, okay. Yeah, and I think draft 2 is the most recent one, yeah.
Okay, great. Thank you.
So the license plate readers is policy 422, but we're going to start with policy 1302 with the surveillance use policy. So, Sergeant, you say that these changes were done by Captain Olieri, but based on our conversation last time, right?
I believe so, yeah.
Sorry, just so I'm not confused. We're 1302 point.
13.2, not the appendix, but the,
13.1, yeah.
Right there.
You have, you
This
have
is
that
one I
right
sent
there.
you.
Mhm. I do, thank you. Sorry, I was a little confused.
Mhm.
so they, yeah, go ahead, Chief.
Oh, I guess, I'm curious if there are additional, how these changes or edits are received by the subcommission?
Well, I think the concerns that the reason why this came back to the subcommittee and the conversation was had is because members of the commission had a concern, as expressed in public comment, about the original, and this is 1302, the original use of the ALPR equipment,
Right.
and now this general order seems to be somehow expanding the scope of its use to not only be in parking enforcement operations, but actually to be part of general operations by the police department, and that's why it was pulled. If I'm correct, from the commission, and it was brought back to the subcommittee to see whether it matched the original intent of the city council, whether that's the original intent behind the purchase and the usage of the equipment, and whether this does constitute an expansion of the use, and whether that expansion has been vetted. What's the intent? If I'm remembering correctly, that's what the commission brought back to the subcommittee. Do you have?
No, that's
is
what
that
I,
your recollection?
That's what I remember also. And I guess it relates to the Berkeley Municipal Code. I'm looking here, we'd be happy to look at it. The 2.99
Mhm.
section, which is referred to, 0.030. I guess just using new surveillance technology or using technology previously approved. I'm looking at 2.99.030 1 little c. And it basically says the city manager must obtain city council approval except in exigent circumstances by placing an item on the action calendar at a duly noticed meeting of the council prior to any of the following. And C is using new surveillance technology or using surveillance technology previously approved by the city for a purpose or in any manner not previously approved by the city council. So I guess that's just the only question
So the,
I have.
Right.
Is this, if what was presented to the council before, and I don't know what was presented to
well,
the
that's
council.
I'm curious.
I guess
to look
that's
at
the
that
first
report
question,
that
is
you were
what
talking
was,
about, but
what was presented to the council in terms of the use of the
Sorry, I
license
didn't get a
plate
chance to print it
readers.
out.
No,
I should.
it's reasonable to look at it. So, I guess I can just conceptually.
Yeah.
So, to my recollection, first I want to give some context. So, keeping in mind that the LPR readers, that we don't share that data out, it's not transmitted to anyone or anybody, it's not uploaded mass data to anybody. One feature of that is that if you have, for example, a shooting where it's our normal practice to for an officer to drive around the neighborhood and write down license plate numbers, that you would be able to run the LPR reader through that area of the crime scene, or the greater area, and that way just capture all the license plates for further investigation if needed by our investigators. It should be kept in mind that the LPR reader does not have a live transmitting link to Department of Motor Vehicles or to the stolen vehicle system or to anything. The way it works is, I think every day, and I haven't looked at this for some time, but there's a file that's uploaded of all the stolen vehicles in California, and the parking citation file, that's uploaded, so when the LPR reader is comparing plates, it's comparing it to like a snapshot of data from the morning rather than a live reach out or link up with another system. So that is that patrol operation. That's what that's referring to. Would be if we had a patrol operation where we're doing that. That's that's the scenario that I recall. I haven't looked at the council item, and yeah, I guess that's the rub of the matter, I suppose. And so I would want to look at the council item to put together
If it's
a
helpful, I
response.
do have it up on my phone, while I don't
Sure.
normally
Can we look at that?
And that's fine.
hand
This
my
is-
phone over to the police. You're more than welcome to sort of browse through that.
Police aren't touching your phone, for the record.
For the record, she gave it to the commissioner. That's, and he's a lawyer, so he's got your back.
So, and I'll say, the other thing, just so that we're staying on top of the code, this 2.99.03, I guess, I'm sorry, 2.99.030, city council approval requirement. Subsection 2 essentially says the city manager is supposed to present the policy for each technology to the police review commission prior to adoption by the council. It says we're also supposed to be, us being the police review commission, shall also be provided with the corresponding surveillance acquisition report that has been presented to council for that surveillance technology. So I suppose and that what I'm looking at
The
here,
acquisition report is
is
here.
that something we add?
Yeah,
That's
yeah,
what
it's
we
in
added.
there.
Okay.
That's, so yeah, remember the structure of the structure of the new policies, in order to, the structure of the new policies
Oh, that's okay.
are related to BMC 2.99 is that they're going to be 1300 series. You're going to get the policy, the acquisition report, and if there was an existing policy, as there has been for many years with LPR, then that's there's that piece as well.
Right.
So that's why we have this kind of awkward first read where there's a couple where there's already a policy in place. That's the reason for that structure. So if we were to seek out a surveillance technology per 2.99 and acquire it, we would be adding, policy number 1303, and it would have the full policy rather than here where we have a policy to make sure we're satisfying 2.99, and we refer a lot to our existing policy, which sometimes is more comprehensive or comprehensive in different ways.
So, and then what I was passed to me was a July 11, 2017.
Oh, yeah, it's July.
Yeah, July 11, 2017 consent calendar matter from the city manager to the mayor and members of the council. And this is submitted by Mr. Director Harrington from the Department of Public Works.
Okay.
And the subject is contract number 9977 amendment, which is portable computer systems doing business as PCS Mobile to purchase 15 automated license plate recognition units. I guess the only question that I have is just the breadth of the language. I suppose I'm not at all saying.
On 1302.28.
13.02. Yeah,
Two.
exactly. I'm actually 2B, that it may be used to support a patrol operation or criminal investigation. I guess my question is, to me that feels so broad that essentially is just sort of all police operations. Maybe I'm wrong. Correct me. Is there a limit? Does that provide a limit to it, or not?
I guess I'd say it's not intended to not provide a limit. It's us putting together, these policies in light of 2.99.
Yeah.
And I don't know off the top of my head if 422, which is heavily brought over from our existing
Yeah.
policies,
So-
if that has a limitation on use.
So if I may,
That's
I'd
fair.
just like to,
Let me look at that.
for my own
Yeah.
peace of mind and maybe for everybody here, just want to kind of go through the history of this policy. So for ALPRs, we got them back in 2016, 2017.
Before then,
Okay, so we had an administrative order back in 2016, and that's attached to your packet. And it basically says that we'll use them only for official and legitimate law enforcement business, along with for the traffic parking enforcement, right? So that was in effect. And then we got Lexipol. and Lexipol had their ALPR data, and our ALPR admin order was actually Lexipol policy. So even before we had Lexipol, we were using their content for our own administrative order. So 2016, we're working with this ALPR administrative order, then we get Lexipol. And so we move Lexipol our ALPR admin order into 422. And then that's kind of what has been given to the subcommittee, but it hasn't gone anywhere because this whole new requirement with the city council about bringing forth that information to the city council and having an additional policy for that item, plus the what do they call it, the acquisition report. So now we've got 422 plus the acquisition report plus the policy, this new policy that the city council wants per 2.99, and all the while this administrative order is still in effect. So and the administrative order is very similar, if not the same as 422. So I think that we're in the 1302 is more about the requirements of the city council municipal code, the 2.99. So I think if we're gonna debate like how the ALPRs and stuff are supposed to be used, that we should be talking about 422. Because that's actually where the meat and potatoes are about how we're going to use it. If we're talking about 1302, we're talking about how we're going to present it to the city council in order to be in compliance with BMC 2.99. So I think it would make more sense if we focused on 422 and just looked at that, and we can mess around with that all we want, and then eventually when we do present it to council, we'll present it along with an updated 1302.
And I think I would and this is really helpful looking at the administrative order, 0012/2016, and I guess the only thing looking at this now that confuses me a little bit, but not much. This is pretty broad in terms of what the uses are. It says it shall be used for official and legitimate law enforcement business in 3A of that. But then there's this statement here, which is just a funny statement to me to have in a department order. It's subsection 4. It says ALPR information gathered and retained by this department may be used and shared with prosecutors or other law enforcement agencies. And then it says only as permitted by law. And the reason I say that's strange to me is because I can't imagine that it would ever authorize, you'd ever put anything in there that would say that you could do it not as permitted by law.
So there's a stylistic concern.
Well, it's not really stylistic, it's more substantive because it's a strange thing to say, because to say only implies that there's some limitation. And to say only as permitted by law basically means there is no limitation other than the law itself.
I would say to that,
Right.
I don't believe I was involved in doing this in 2016. I did some work on earlier work on trying to put this sort of stuff together, but it often feels when we write policy that we are trying to affirm to our community that we are following the law, that we are, and so to me, when I read that, what I see is us saying we're following the law, because that's the way it feels at times like we need to say that over and over again in our policies. So that's where I sort of see that.
Well, I guess then
it's not intended. I don't think it's intended to bump out something or create some exceptions. It's what happens when people constantly tell you that you're messing with the law, or you're on the edge of the law, or you're breaking the law. You want to say we're following the law.
In some general orders, it actually uses the language applicable law. So this doesn't have that language. And some general orders applicable by state and federal law. Lexipol is very clear in having that there. So I think there's a little confusion here, right? Because of federal law against California law and the usage in,
and I think also what I'm getting at is I'm looking at the order for exactly what you talked about, which is what has been authorized previously, right? And what's clear to me through the current uses section is all of that's about parking enforcement.
Yeah.
And so then I'm thinking, okay, are there other authorized uses beyond parking enforcement that have already been approved?
Right.
And the place that I can read where I think there is broader language to authorize other stuff is that sentence that says the ALPR information gathered and retained by this department may be used and shared with prosecutors or other enforcement agencies. See, but then it's a little weird because it says only as permitted by law. So then I'm like, right, is this really a sentence that's like authorizing all other uses? And what you're indicating is maybe it wasn't.
Well, I think 3A is authorizing shall be used for official and legitimate law enforcement business.
Yeah, I mean,
Yeah,
even
you're
the
not-
word of legitimate law enforcement business
Again-
is a we're following the law. We're
Right.
not
I
trying
mean,
to
again, I guess then that's the question is, do those sentences was that, and I understand this is from the department, I guess the question is there somewhere that the city council, in approving that was
Right.
saying, hey, use it for whatever you want. So
So-
they could never say, use it for illegal purposes. So
Right.
if they're saying that, then that really, to me, at least the argument is that they've already authorized you to use the license plate readers for anything and everything.
Right.
And I'm just not sure whether that's actually the case or not. And that's what I'm trying to understand.
So I think it's valuable, and I appreciate you bringing up
Yeah.
the legislative history. So the July 11, 2017 item is an item where council is, I believe it's where they're adding
Yeah, like
adding
15
more
or
to parking
something like
enforcement.
that.
So
Yeah.
we're using LPR and adding more of, adding more, particularly, adding more for parking enforcement.
Mhm.
In that, let me find the language. So I pulled it up.
Sorry, I have the thing too.
Oh.
Sorry, I was still reading. I'm gonna now read over that cheat sheet.
Okay. You guys have it
So,
now?
I'm looking at
Oh, okay.
the item.
All right.
So, I thought I saw it. Sorry. Current situation and the effects.
It's also used to identify.
Is used to identify stolen vehicle parking scoff laws. The city's ALPR use and data privacy policies are summarized in BPD Administrative Order 01/2016, which is this document,
Which says
which
pretty
is
much the same thing.
provided as attachment 2.
Mm-hmm.
So the council considered this item, including this, that was part of their packet for consideration. The annotated agenda indicated that they pulled it from consent, moved it to action, 8 speakers, authorized the manager to execute the amendment to the contract to buy more, to increase parking enforcement opportunities, capacity and effectiveness, money terms, and amend section 7F Administrative Order 2016 to defer any release of data until the surveillance policy and ordinance are adopted. So they knew at that time that the surveillance policy was likely to happen. So then we look at, I just think like, okay, but then we need to look at 7F.
Mm-hmm.
So aggregated LPR data not related to specific criminal investigations shall not be released to any local, state, or federal agency or entity without express written consent of the city manager. As I see it, they have reviewed. That's a comment about aggregated data and reflects the concern about us, the city of Berkeley, providing our aggregated LPR data into anybody else's database. And so that's the one concern in the annotated agenda that was attended to by council when they passed this. So, to my mind, in terms of sort of legislative history, they have read and approved 2016, and I think it is valuable to keep that in mind and then shift over to 422, which is largely sourced and fueled by the admin order 01/2016. And in the case where there's identical language brought over, it has been reviewed by council under this item in July of 2017. that make sense? In other words,
Yeah,
council has
I guess.
approved this, except, as I recall, they were not, they were unhappy with the idea the city manager could, by their own fiat, authorize the the release of aggregated LPR data to some other agency. And the way they addressed that issue was to say the technology surveillance policy is coming, and that will provide the guidance on releasing aggregated LPR data to NCRIC or to whomever into the big, into another database. So that feels to me like it's been resolved. And maybe we could work on 422 and because I also want to, that's my speculative, earlier when I spoke about this one, like legitimate law enforcement or whatever I said, that's kind of my speculative, like I'm guessing that's what was going on. 422, Sergeant Spielman is here, I'm here, and we can.
Yeah, because
we can
that's
zoom in.
definitely that legitimate law enforcement purpose that was brought over. It looks like it was our language, as permitted by law.
Yeah, I guess what I'm struggling with, is the question I asked is, did the council approve only parking enforcement or something beyond parking enforcement that was still limited, or something, the full breadth of anything? And the parts you point out are, helpful. I would say that, so for me, the two key parts are 7B of 1-2016, administrative order, which is the statement that I talked about, saying, did I say 7B? I didn't mean to say 7B. I meant to say the
3A?
yeah, it would have been 3A, right?
3A was the
Well, there's 3A,
legitimate,
there's 3A, and then there's 4,
and
3A,
it's just section 4.
4, and I agree also for 7F. At least there's a premise to that statement. It seems to me that aggregated ALP data not related to specific criminal investigation shall not be released to any state. So that at least seems to suggest that there is an authorization for its use related to specific criminal investigations. So that's kind of where I'm falling on this, like, just because this is very confusing to me, but I'm saying, like, with 7F, which you pointed out, it does seem to suggest that there was the idea that it would be used for specific criminal investigations.
Right.
And so for me then, I suppose that's a little less broad, but maybe you could explain to me, because maybe it's not then the language that's actually being proposed now, which is not only criminal investigations, but, patrol operations, I guess is what it.
Which makes it any and
to
all.
support a patrol operation. So, it seems to me that, and I'm not saying whether it should or shouldn't be used with a patrol operation, but I guess if I was looking at this, I would think that you'd have to get council approval unless you had the language to support a specific criminal investigation. That's kind of how I see it. I will admit that this is all very confusing.
And it's hard to track it back.
It's hard to figure out what was specifically authorized and what wasn't, when there is, that there are some terms that could be definitely interpreted to authorize anything, but then there seems to be some overall context
more
and tone
specific.
that
I think
seems to suggest some limitation.
Yeah, but
If
'Cause the
there's
thing is-
ever an opportunity to make a comment, I would like to.
Yeah, because I would
Go ahead.
also, just real quickly, because I would also say, if you really interpret that, that statement to use for any legitimate purpose, or the other one that says to use, not violating the law, basically, if that's truly to authorize everything, then you wouldn't even need to have 7F. Right, there'd be no point in having
So by
7F.
inference,
And the language
it's
is
clear
So
we're
by
not looking
7F
to
to
use a
authorize
giant net of
everything,
doing
right,
everything.
exactly.
It's-
So to me, that makes me come back to 7F and say, what does 7F actually authorize? And unfortunately, it's not written in a way that affirmatively authorizes anything. It's a way that prohibits some things with a premise of other things that are authorized. And as I can tell on the premise, it's what I said, which is in relationship to specific investigations. I'm not saying that it shouldn't be, there's not legitimate reasons to use it with ongoing operations, but it does seem to then put you in this category of the council should
Right, and then we need to
look at that.
we need
and
to
I guess-
remember that we're
and
going to be
explain
reporting
why.
to council every year how we used LPR.
Yeah.
So they'll have an opportunity to review how it was actually used.
Yeah.
And to weigh in if they have concerns at that point. And we're new in our life here with the technology response ordinance, right?
Go ahead.
Well, I do think it matters a little that there are some changes between the Administrative Order 1-216, which according to that council report is what the council looked at as the policy when they actually approved it, and then 422, which does expand the scope and which I guess never really came back before the council. In other words, the last
Correct.
time the council said anything about LPRs, it was when they bought the documents. So just to kind of note what those are, as far as I can see them. Under purpose, subject 1, it says ALPRs may
Could
be
you
used
go
by the
back?
Berkeley Police Department,
Paragraph?
parking enforcement and traffic units, which are, you know,
Wait, sorry,
specific.
which paragraph?
Okay, I'm at Administrative Order -01-2016,
Administrative
which
order.
is the one that went with the contract.
Mhm.
And I'm looking under purpose. And the purpose does say specifically, ALPRs may be used by the Berkeley Police Department, parking enforcement and traffic units, which are two specific units of the police department.
Right?
Criminal investigations is obviously, it's a different unit.
No, it's not obvious. The parking
Okay.
enforcement officers could be asked to move their go-fors up and down the street to capture license plates. That's the way that potentially would work. We don't have LPRs attached to patrol cars,
Right.
and as far as I know, we don't have any police officers trained in the operation of the LPRs. So
Okay.
you're throwing a separation that I just want to be parking enforcement are park enforcement officers, and traffic units are motorcycle and
Okay.
police officers and sergeant and lieutenant who
I'm
ride
als-
motorcycles.
Okay,
So
I'm also looking at the next page and I'm going to section, what is it, ALPR data collection and retention.
Uh-huh.
I'm looking at number 5, it says the parking enforcement manager responsible for ensuring proper collection and retention of ALPR data, so it's operating under the parking enforcement manager.
right.
And I do see some ability for Berkeley police personnel to access the data for legitimate law enforcement uses, but the language about routine patrol support and about sending ALPRs to canvass license plates around any crime scene, those are specific bits of language that came into 422 that don't exist in 1-2016. So it is an expansion, and it's not something that the council per se ever approved, because if you go through 2016, under current ALPR deployments, it describes the sort of scope of activity, which includes
Can you go by section numbers?
parking
or-
enforcement. I'm sort of
Just
looking under current ALPR
paragraph.
deployments, kind of 9 and 10. You know, this is what we do, which was presented as this is what we're doing with the current equipment, this is what we're going to do with the new equipment. We're going to do parking enforcement, we're gonna do scofflaw enforcement, we're gonna boot cars, Paylock is gonna store the data.
Can I ask you what you think the import of 7F is?
In this document. Yeah, well, that's related to aggregated ALPR data, not individual license plates, but sort of,
But then it says data not related to specific criminal investigation.
so. Yeah, that's all of our data, where people are parking in the city, where we're finding scofflaws, that kind of aggregated data that's not criminal, because parking is not a criminal matter, it's a civil matter, more or less.
So it's a 14, yeah, it's a
Would not be
privacy.
released without the express of the consent manager, but specific data related to the Concord police are looking for this person, does Berkeley have any information about where their car was, would be covered under 7E.
So that's, yeah, so you see 7F as, and now I'm really getting
Yeah.
into grammar, but
And,
you
yeah,
see
and then
that
the
as being,
question
you,
is,
you read
know,
that as aggregated LPR data. That is not related, so limiting as opposed to aggravated data, which is not related.
Yeah, I mean, the intent, I think
Which is
the intent
related,
of that
yeah.
then is like, we're not doing our we're not giving our mass data to anybody.
Yeah, I guess the confusion that I have then in that, because I think it is probably, but I see your interpretation, but that, again, whether 7F assumes that whether the premise of that is that the readers can be used for a specific criminal investigation or not.
Well, I'm gonna be honest,
It's very unclear.
This is so confusing, and I think it's because, to be honest, no, this is not a criticism of city council, but I'm just not sure they've read all of it, because or that they looked at the connective tissue between one aspect of the instruction and the other one. Because as a layman's eyes, what I hear on the purpose is said to me that is law enforcement purposes as related only to traffic and enforcement. Because breaking a traffic law or a parking law, you're still breaking a law, that's a law enforcement, you get a ticket, you get a citation. I'm not sure whether they focus on that. So to me, somehow, I cannot think we need clarity from city council, whether their intention was just to be specific on the directive, to just be law enforcement as it relates to traffic law and parking enforcement, or whether they did see, as I think they should, the scope of criminal investigations, and I just don't.
Yeah.
I'm like
that's
there.
fine. The point
Right.
is 422 is what's going to go before council.
Right.
And so I think we should be talking about we should be looking at 422. We can understand.
Let's do that then.
I mean, if we stick with 422, there may be points that come back to this, so we can talk about origin or language. But 422 is what's going to go in front of council.
I understand that,
And
but
so-
I'm gonna have to sell this at the commission. At the commission, I'm gonna get what's gonna
No,
come back to
I
me,
understand.
so I have to have it, it's gonna come, this is the line that's gonna come back to me. And if I go, well, let's refer to 422 as, let's work on 422, let's not really look at whatever your not you, but whoever that commissioner interpretation is of the scope of the instruction. And then they're gonna say, but I'm not reading that there, and that's creating,
I
that's
feel
what's creating
whatever
the bunch
issues
one.
may exist in 2016 are going to exist in 422, and so I'm interested to have that discussion so I can see about amending language in 422 to a point we think it's acceptable to the
Mhm.
commission and to council in their overall review for the BMC 299 material.
And I am with you. I
That's all.
just wanna say for the record that we can have this broader conversation of, I think you're right, but that I think we're gonna get a lot of pushback on just that line being their
I'm-
interpretation, and
I'm
whether
I'm
if this the
open-
basis for this, then why is
I
this
want to
not
move
here?
to 422 so I can think about editing in a way that.
Can we go through what the authorized uses are in 422? So I'm looking at, because the way I think about it is, I think, we can all agree, it's just kind of, to me, not clear whether council is authorized this or not. So now
Mhm.
let's make the pitch for what should be authorized in our mind.
Mhm.
So if we look at 422.4 operations, that's the section that
Right.
says, one, it says use is restricted to the purposes outlined below. So that to me says, hey, there is some restriction,
Mhm.
right? Shall not use it or allow the equipment for any other unauthorized purposes. Now, we should make sure that each one of these is actually affirmatively stating a permitted purpose. So,
Yes.
so, so actually the way it's stated, it says, restricted for the purposes outlined below, okay. But then it says shall not use for any unauthorized purpose.
Can we just-
Okay. Yep.
I mean, I
Go
just
ahead.
want like
Yeah.
A, B, C.
Yeah,
just
let's
take
do
it
that. So A, I'm sorry, I was trying to grab a pen. So shall only be used for official law enforcement business, okay? Yeah, that
Mhm.
seems to make sense.
So generally, we're okay with that.
Yes, to me that's okay. I don't know if anyone else has comments. It's, one second. I actually think that that's not a necessary section. I actually think it gets confusing.
I imagine it rises out of Lexipol, but I
Uh-huh.
don't know. And in that case, I'm gonna leave it in because that's just
Okay.
unless there's a real reason to delete it. I want to leave it.
The only thing, the only reason it confuses me is because, it's saying, it does use the word only be used, but
Mhm.
then it's saying, like, is that an authorization to use for any law
There's-
enforcement?
I think there's
That's the
further
confusion.
confinements and specificity
Right,
in the
but-
following paragraphs.
Okay, cause this is talking about restrictions, right? So
Mhm.
use is
So-
restricted, so these,
So
I'm
let's
just
get down to
saying,
this list of restrictions.
yeah, but I'm saying these are each giving a list of what, hey, this is authorized, so, okay, I guess it's all right, authorized only for official law enforcement business.
Okay.
Shouldn't there be some language here about the parking enforcement?
Well,
Yes.
I think he wants to use
that's
it
the primary
beyond,
purpose.
but I think you wanna use it beyond, the police department wants to use it beyond parking enforcement, right?
Yeah, but I'm saying you have a list here, I mean, it seems to me like you've left the primary purpose
Oh, okay,
out, it's
well, we'll
not
put that
there.
down at the bottom.
Yeah, and
so
that's
parking
because
enforcement.
all the concern is about anything other than the primary concern, I would
Okay.
imagine, but,
I know,
But yeah, it
this
should be
policy
included,
should have-
so.
Okay, if this is the only authorized, so one is it should only be used for a law enforcement business. Here's my only confusion, I know I'm not making it clear about that section, is that is almost like a statement of what you can't use it for, not what you
Yeah.
can use it for.
Yeah.
And this is supposed to be delineating what permitted purposes are.
Yeah,
And
I mean, so the question is, that line, and I'm gonna go back to that, cause it's, this is what, as the chair who's gonna have to push this forward, is a problem for me. I mean, I think that language of LPRs may be used by the Berkeley Police Department, parking enforcement and traffic units for official law enforcement purposes. I think that's big, that's the scope, I'm so caught up on administrative order. So, but because that's what tells me, because if you cannot talk about expansion of possible uses if in the original enacting order it's not included, particularly on the purpose. So, but I think that it could be worked out if you have that line
Where was
and
the
then
line
you
you
say,
just used? Where was the line you just used?
you say ALPRs may be used by the Berkeley Police
the paragraph,
Department,
please?
parking
Section
enforcement,
paragraph.
this is purpose on the administrative order.
Okay.
I'm trying to look for a compromise.
I'm
ALPRs
I'm
may
trying
be
to follow
used-
you, that's all.
APS may be used by the Berkeley Police Department, parking enforcement traffic units for official, parking traffic units. And then you can say it, and any other legitimate and official law enforcement business. I think you can marry some of this
Mhm.
with the other one, and then you still make the reference to what it was intended to, and then say, and any other legitimate or official law enforcement, whether it's business or operations, whatever that word is. But
Okay.
there's no connection here.
Yeah, can I also, I have an easy fix here now that I see it. So if you move the language from subpart A, an ALPR shall only be used for
Mhm.
official law enforcement business, so we won't be removing it.
Mhm.
Move it to the beginning of 422.4.
Remove it to 422.1.
The very beginning of
Four.
422.4.
Very first, make it the first
So
sentence.
there's no A, it'll just be the first sentence. An ALPR shall
Oh,
only be
copy.
used for official law enforcement business, period. And then the next sentence is, use of an ALPR is restricted to the purposes outlined below.
Sure, I like it.
All right, and then let me just, so close
Does
the
that
thought.
I'm with you. We're gonna have to.
Yeah,
This
and
is-
then-
this
I'm
is
so
just,
then
so
that-
just for purpose, like, I just wanna make it clear, and especially we're
Yeah.
kind of on the record and just,
Mhm.
is that my intent is to have a broad and open conversation, and I may, during that conversation, think, I think I'll do that, so I may say, that sounds reasonable to me. I just wanted to, so it's not 100% commitment.
Understood.
But I am trying to just
Yeah.
express that, so everything I sort of agree to or think about doing
You have to vet it.
is subject
Got
to
it.
us
Yeah.
going back and
Totally.
making sure
Yeah,
it's
you have to
completed.
vet it.
To that
Understood.
end, the move is a potentially acceptable change. I like it. Taking that phrase from Admin Order 1/2016, that last sentence and purpose, saying APLs may be used by the Berkeley Police Department parking enforcement and traffic units for official law enforcement purposes, I might consider amending it to ALPRs shall primarily be used by the Berkeley Police Parking Enforcement and Traffic Units for official law enforcement purposes, to really set the stage, which is the absolute truth, which is that's how it's primarily being used. So I'm thinking that might be and then we make that.
Maybe that
we
could
put
be
that over
subpart
here.
A, right, that
so
could
that
be the new
becomes,
A.
it becomes A.
Yeah,
That
that's-
becomes A,
that's-
move the
that's-
other
that's
A
the-
to the preamble, and then make that A.
That's the connective tissue,
Yeah.
Chief. I think that will do it.
Yeah,
Yeah.
so.
And then it,
And
So
then
that answers-
I'm noticing on B, I'm sorry.
no, go ahead.
Oh, I just noticed that on B, we have a difference in language between policy 422, number B, and 1302.2B, where there's a red line correction or a
right.
line edit about conjunction with the routine or to support a patrol operation.
Right.
And I'm feeling like, from what I'm hearing and wanting to really express clear for council, our community's benefit, it may be that may be used to support specific criminal investigations. Like what I'm trying to get across there is that we don't anticipate, I don't envision using it in some broad kind of standard way. If there is, as the example I gave, we have a shooting and a typical canvass the neighborhood activity for an officer is to drive around and collect license plates. Well, if it's daytime and the PEOs are here and they're running their go-fors, we run them through the area.
That's right.
So we at least have a snapshot capture of the
Takes
of
away the
licenses.
narrative of someone saying
and I-
police officers are driving the city doing APRs to find out what people are doing.
Right, and
without being
also
reasonable.
just keep in mind, no police officers are driving LPR units. It's all
Yeah. No, I listen, and I
also,
agree
the
with
area
you.
that I could see people complaining about would be if there's
Expressing
some,
concern about
well, yeah,
Right.
if
the
there,
record.
yeah, if there's some political protest or something,
Exactly.
and people are all coming to a park or something,
Whether it's a preemptive measure,
to
it's used
protest
preemptively.
preemptively, and that the police are then recording license plates of people coming to. I'm not
Yes.
saying that that's there, but I would think that would be the biggest area of concern for the public.
And then the FBI is asking for the data for a legitimate law enforcement purpose, and that's what scares people.
So it's that collection,
but
and I don't know if that would count.
But we're not
as
there
a
yet, right? So
criminal
we can talk about the
investigation.
collection,
Yeah.
the dissemination,
But
and
we could
retention.
do that.
Yeah, and I'm not
later
talking
on.
about
just-
the
we could
access,
do
but
that
just
now.
the collection.
We could do that now.
If
Yeah,
you
but
have
we
a
don't
court
do
order.
that.
I'm
Well,
not
there's-
saying that we would, but I'm saying everybody's afraid of us collecting license plate information at a protest. We could do that now without an ALPR.
Yeah, you
know.
could, but
But I'm not saying that we do, because we don't.
be pretty.
Right.
It might be to be
Well, and
be very.
And I think
difficult.
the fact of the matter
Yeah,
is,
you
if
would just write
if a
down the
protest
license
is,
plate
Yeah.
and
the
run
fact
it
of the matter
later.
is, if a protest is occurring
Mhm.
during daylight hours and commercial hours, and PEOs are moving around, they are doing it not for that purpose, but that's just part of that. They're just doing it, and so I think that relates more to releasing aggregated data, and that's the protection
Yeah.
for the community, which is the idea of releasing a giant chunk of aggregated LPR data to whomever.
I guess
so-
the question that I then would have, the other issue would be what constitutes a specific criminal investigation. If
I'm
Yeah,
looking at
Paul.
language.
yeah, I know I haven't
Mm.
quite come up any, because then the question becomes, okay, I guess just how broad that is. I have to think about it more, Chief. So.
Is there any protection against other law enforcement agencies, no names, that hypothetically might be operating in less than good faith or as bad actors in terms of, what makes it a specific criminal investigation? I think there's some language in 422 that's kind of specific.
I mean, we
I'm
could
sure
say
it's
specific
adequate, but I
BPD
would-
criminal
I
investigation.
would think about putting up a
Yeah.
firewall against maybe entities not acting in bad faith, or entities not acting in good faith.
I think
No,
it's
it's kinda hard to
impossible
judge.
to
Yeah.
It's kinda
make
hard
those
to judge.
determinations, because you may hate the FBI today,
Yeah.
and you may want them to be here investigating white supremacists coming into our town and causing a riot tomorrow.
Or you might have a directive on the
It's hard to
circuit.
I
for the
do
but I mean,
have principles, I wouldn't want you handing over the aggregate LPR data even if they were white supremacists.
you
I do.
you might
I'm
you
just
might,
saying that there's.
you might still get a
there's-
directive by the Attorney General of the State of California for some information, and that's a legitimate criminal investigation, the Law Enforcement Act, and you wouldn't be able to
The
say.
Attorney General doesn't direct me to do anything.
I guess I'm just trying to understand what, and I'm just saying this
Say
out
that
Kick
to
me
him.
if I sound.
is what
That's
the,
Herrera.
what the,
What's he-
kind of what the
Well-
trigger is to be able to start using it, And so, I understand traffic, I understand, to me, a criminal investigation is more of a reactive criminal investigation,
Mhm.
it's something that's already been reported already, it's a crime having taken place.
Right.
That's what I think about it. I suppose the fear becomes if it is not done and in a report, in investigating a report.
It's not
of
an efficient
crime,
thing.
But yeah, then becomes, Yeah, that's basically it. It was,
So it's how to rewrite to support specific criminal investigations.
What triggers
Well,
the use of
what
the
is
criminal
and-
investigation?
And
yeah,
also,
I think you understand what I'm.
and
getting
also,
at.
we need to remember our administrative order, when it specifically talks about these ALPR things being used by parking enforcement and traffic units, it's because they're the only ones who have them.
Mhm.
They literally, they're authorized to physically use them. When we're talking in 422, now this was written for agencies where a lot of agencies, all their police cars are equipped with them. So when it's talking about an ALPR may be used in conjunction with any routine patrol operation, they're talking about beat cops driving around their city while the ALPR
That's what that language
is
is.
going through. And that's just them driving around. And then when it boop, 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 because there's a stolen car or a car wanted on a felony murder, it's gonna let them know. And that's not a specific criminal investigation, that's just them out on patrol, bebopping around and getting notified that there's a murder suspect in their city. But we don't have those on our cars, we only have them on parking enforcement. So the only time that we would ever really use traffic enforcement or the parking units to come by is the scenario that the chief's talking about, because we don't have ALPR readers on our patrol cars. All our cops would want them for that specific reason, to find violators and robbery
Stolen cars.
suspects who are in our city. You drive into Alameda, your license plate gets read, all those cops know that there's somebody who committed a murder in their city.
Oh, yeah.
And then beep boop bop,
Then-
they know that they left.
Then what if you said an ALPA may be used by parking enforcement in conjunction with a specific criminal investigation? Because then that, so if these things are only used by parking enforcement, then.
Specific or legitimate?
Well,
Specific, you use the word
He
specific,
wants the
legitimate.
legitimate in there.
Well, to
That's
me-
where,
No, no, no,
that's
no,
where
I'm
we
just-
get it
no,
from.
I'm-
That's where we
I'm
get it
not-
from.
I'm not
What's the
big into-
threshold?
It's a good word.
yeah, I wouldn't use legitimate. Specific I'm fine with, and the only reason I wouldn't use legitimate is because to me it's like
What's the
saying
definition, who defines what legitimate is?
legitimate, and also
That's right.
legitimate basically
Okay.
is just like legal, and I'm assuming the police isn't gonna do anything illegal anyway, or will already be banned by some, it will already be prohibited by law, so.
But you also have
But
to
I
think.
understand your point,
No,
but-
you also have to think of the community thinking that whether, and this is where they're coming from, whether they're used or not by police officers, whether they are in cars or not. Would there be a situation in the future
Yeah,
in
in the
which it
future.
would be part of the equipment that every single police
Yeah, totally.
officer will have in their car, and
Yeah.
then how is that regulated and measured and monitored?
And that's why
So
I think
you
you
have to think-
regulate it by saying by
I think
parking
two-
and
five
I think
years from now.
that's actually one of the strengths
Yeah.
of the BMC 299 is I feel like if you because you're reporting on an annual basis, you would be obliged to be reporting about a major change in deployment,
On
you
the
know, adding
use.
the cars. I can tell you budget wise and
Well, you would have to ask for the money to buy
practically
them.
speaking, I can
Mhm.
tell you like it's definitely not on anybody's radar for the next few years that we're going to equip patrol cars with LPRs.
Yeah.
It's,
So I guess that all makes sense to me. That'd be my recommendation, is say used by parking, what's the actual division that has these things now?
well, it's the
Traffic.
traffic bureau, which
So-
includes the parking
So
enforcement.
what if we
And
just
they're
said
part of the
traffic?
investigations division,
Right, so if we said traffic bureau.
Because it's moved to,
That
now
kind
it's
of-
a
What- so
captain,
what
right?
is? Can you? I'm sorry.
An
Can you?
ALPR may be used by,
What letter are we on? Or what?
I'm on B.
On B. Maybe used.
I guess it would apply both to B and C. No, yeah,
Are we?
may be used by traffic bureau.
Where are you?
I'm in
I feel
B.
like it's kind of
B,
redundant.
So used by, well, I mean,
By- by-
that's the confusion, it's kind of what
What if-
George is pointing
well, I
out
guess
to,
what
if,
if-
5 years
so
from
let's just
now,
say,
all
you
of
know,
a
we have
sudden
certain officers
it's
who
standard
are-
equipment.
I'm sorry.
No,
Yeah,
I was
we need
just,
to
you
overtalk.
didn't, you weren't.
So just like my scenario that I'm worried about is we do have certain officers who are like way ahead of everybody else and very engaged with technology.
Yeah.
And one officer in particular who's so involved, who's full time involved in IT stuff, Officer Rago, who
Mhm.
works on it. So what if we had a scenario where he knows how to operate the LPR readers in a parking enforcement go form in one of those scooters? I don't want to like make that be a policy violation because he's not an actual parking enforcement officer.
Mm-hmm.
I'm just saying, you know,
Mhm.
we're speculating about these kind of far end, outer
Mm-hmm.
threshold possibilities. I'm just looking for the space, like, if we need it, we need to be able to do it.
You know, it's
and
Berkeley,
we're gonna
they
report
can,
on
they
it.
can needle,
And so-
they can thread a needle, they'll thread a needle
So I
all
think,
night long.
I think,
Specific.
yeah, I mean, for example, in C, you know, it says, to using ALPR equipped cars, they're actually mostly on the go force. So
Mhm.
vehicles is a better word for that, in that place.
Mhm.
Well, that's
Yeah,
so-
broad
I
and
agree with the
specific.
specific, we talked about, the
Okay.
language you gave.
So to support specific criminal investigations,
Mhm.
period. And then in C, I'm looking at, well, on LPR maybe use account specific crime scene, particular search in the LPR vehicles.
And then that would be eliminating routine patrol operations.
Yes, so, eliminating in conjunction with any routine patrol operation. So an
Well-
ALPR may be used,
For a,
To
2 or
support.
4, support
Yeah.
support specific criminal investigation.
Mhm.
2 or 4
To
may be
support.
used to support specific criminal investigations. Okay.
Mhm.
That works for me.
And then C talks.
Does C need to be in there? It doesn't seem like an actual use. It seems like some random comments that may be
Well, I think
helpful policy, but I'm not sure that they're uses if we're trying to make a list of uses.
Let me just take a
That's
look.
the exact example that the chief just gave about the canvassing.
Yeah.
So that's an example.
So I think the value of it is kind of in transparency, which is to let the community know and to suggest to our own people that this is an okay thing to do if you're tasked with managing or investigating, working on this issue.
Mhm.
So C, I think is and it's my understanding, I kind of doubt it's done because the system is not broadly accessible by a whole bunch of people, but the partial license plate, I believe there's an ability in the software where an officer could enter a partial license plate into our own database so that the LPR, when it's moving, could get a hit
Yeah.
and at least note that hit, and then the officer could get some partial hits. But these things to me are good information for the community to know and for our own staff to know that these are, and our electeds. I mean, that these are what we envision.
Yeah.
Okay,
I agree.
can I have one other thing? I think D through F all make sense to have in here, but I don't think they're delineated authorization, so I just don't think they should be main bullets. They shouldn't be, they should just be statements in a paragraph. Cause if this,
I agree.
Do you think that could,
I think it's confusing, cause you're trying to
Right.
lay out, here are the numerated,
so you think that should go under 422.2 under policy?
it can go to policy or it can just have its
somewhere
own
else.
paragraph at the end. I mean,
Yeah.
right there, I just think it should be a narrative and it shouldn't be.
Can you say the reason again?
Because this is, what we're trying to do here is numerate or delineate.
The uses by
Each
which
of
it's
permitted
authorized.
uses.
I see.
Right.
These aren't about use.
These
are
aren't about uses, these are about.
Yeah, these are
you know,
about-
these are sort
yeah.
of policy considerations.
Yeah, I mean, it's even restricted use. I
Mhm.
mean,
Sarge, you said you agreed, like collapse them into their own paragraph, maybe at the
Sure.
end?
Yeah, I would say. I mean, it could be because we're talking about the times that it is authorized above, and then we could talk about the times that it's not authorized or restrictions. No member, no member, and then
yeah, it's
yeah,
practical,
it's
can
just
be
it's
under
more of
the
like
So we
paragraph.
could collapse-
procedures.
We could just collapse D and F, make it a 3-sentence long paragraph
Yeah,
at the end of the section.
Yeah,
Something like that.
That would be my recommendation.
yeah. If practicable, can just be after to do so.
let's
That would
say
work.
let's say we'll look at that, and it could be as we go forward, we might realize, oh, it actually should go somewhere else or
Mhm.
could or whatever.
Mhm.
Yeah, does
All
that
right.
make sense, Kathy?
That feels
Yes.
like it'd be a discussion on this.
You're taking it off, I'm just letting easy work.
Mhm.
He used to work. But what else? What else are we looking at here? Data collection and retention. How are we
Mhm.
doing on this
Mhm.
particular section of 422?
Well, I think that we're going to get rid of the only as permitted by law, right?
Mhm.
Mhm.
I wonder whether, that particular sentence is similar to 422.7. I wonder whether you need to have it in both places. Maybe you should just get the language right at 422.7.
Yeah,
Sure.
I agree, I think you should get rid of that
Yeah.
sentence.
I'm all for getting rid of.
So
Extra
you think
language.
you go 422.5 and it just goes right into the investigation sufficient, Captain? Is that what we're doing, or we're cut into it's something above still
Yep, yep, yep.
remain?
I think the sentence that doesn't need to be there is ALPR information gathered and retained by this department
Yeah.
and used and
I
shared.
agree with that.
Yeah.
Because the sharing is under 422.7, what the
Yeah.
parameters are.
I
But
like
that's-
that.
Yeah.
But that talks about prosecutorial process, right? So that's okay? Because one makes a
Where's-
distinctive.
With law enforcement
There's
or
Both
section 7 that
prosecutorial.
Yeah.
refers to
I agree with you that that
other
covers
law
it.
enforcement or
Let's get rid of that.
prosecutorial
Okay.
agencies.
So
Yeah,
it
you
looks
could
like
just
the same thing.
eliminate.
Yeah, but
the
it adds a different word that is not on the other one. So I mean, if we're fine with the other one is broader, then that's fine, and that should go out.
I'm not saying that, but I'm saying that whatever language
It's
we
repetitive.
decide on doesn't need to be in 422.5 and 422.7, it's just being one or the other.
So going back to 422.5, first paragraph.
I think it's just eliminating the last sentence.
Okay.
Well, I thought it was eliminating the first sentence of 422.5. All data and images gathered. Oh wait.
No, no, no.
What was I?
No, I think it's eliminating the last sentence and then
Oh,
okay.
keeping,
ALPR.
keeping the
Copy.
first sentence of 422.7.
Copy. Okay. my
But
bad.
I'm gonna ask a question,
422.7.
because since we're talking about 422.5, taking LPR information gathered and retained, that line, we're marrying that to 422.7, releasing LPR data. What about that blue annotation under it that says data may be released to other authorized and verified law enforcement officials and agencies for legitimate law enforcement purposes? We're gonna completely just take that out. That doesn't exist. That's a block of information that we already have discussed, that it's no longer
Well, it's,
practical.
I think it's saying that the new draft language in the first sentence of 422.7 is sort of based in part or captures what's in that block of blue text that starts with
Yes.
APLR data.
Okay.
So that won't show up in the text, but,
Expansion.
but it's a reference to walk you through where it came from.
So any concerns on data collection? I mean, it doesn't necessarily
I do think, and I have no problem with that, I do think that's something worth emphasizing to the city council, so it's not kind of buried, so they're approving what they're approving it.
It might be helpful to take the language in blue and put it into 1302. I know we're not talking about 1302, but 1302.9 is the same section of 1302, and the language is missing there. And it seems to me like it should go there. 1302.9, because it's the same question, it's data share.
1302.9 has 3 paragraphs.
ALPR
Now,
data.
where are you suggesting that this blue text go?
Oh, you're saying.
I think the blue text would become the new first sentence of 1302.9, right?
Third order data sharing.
yeah, because if you're sharing something, you're releasing it, right?
That's the language for sharing with other law enforcement officials and agencies.
It's anyway shared.
Right,
So
but it's
why
like
not have it just match up with 422.7,
Yeah.
which is what it does.
which is what it does.
So, 422.7 sentence, the first sentence, it has a comma at the end with a little clause, but the first sentence ending coming to permitted by law is identical to the first sentence in 1302.9.
Right, but I thought we
So-
were replacing with the blue block language.
You were
No.
suggesting that, but I'm saying the 422.7 first sentence
I mean, the only,
is there verbatim in 1302.9, and if we don't need the blue language for
Right.
422.7, I would say we don't need the
Yeah.
language
The-
for
I agree.
1302.9.
I
Didn't
agree.
we
The
agree
only-
we wanted specific criminal investigations?
that's the difference, is that
Yeah, but that's in a
last
different
thing.
spot.
Yeah, but I guess the question is whether that relates to data versus, sharing data as opposed to collecting data.
Right,
That's the only
and
question.
that's,
So
yeah.
the third paragraph under 1302.9, third paragraph, aggregate LPR data not related to specific criminal investigation shall not be released, et cetera, et cetera. So that's capturing
So-
the necessity for specific criminal investigations and for not releasing aggregated data.
But it's
Maybe?
not for non-aggregated data. I mean, are we
Sorry.
really gonna share with any law enforcement agency that asks, even if it's not related to a criminal investigation?
I think that we need to keep focused on 422, because if we start talking
Yeah.
about what's gonna be entered into 1302, we could change everything in
Yeah, so,
1302
yeah.
if we change 422.
So we just sort of table it for now,
Yeah.
not discount it, but table it for now so we can get through this.
Yeah.
Okay, well then the question is, does the blue data belong in 422.7? Because it's there in blue, I don't know what that means.
I guess so here's how I see the question, I'm not saying what the answer is. It's, should there be any limitation on sharing the data with other law enforcement agencies? And right now, the way it's written is it can be used for any law enforcement purpose.
May,
It may
it's not a
be.
shall, or
That's
should,
right,
it's
that's
a
right.
may.
May,
So
all
what's the
purpose or
discretion?
or any permissible, any
Yeah.
legally permissible purpose. And it just says they have to make a request and you guys have to decide whether or not to,
That's right.
to
So
share it or
what
not.
triggers the may to a yes, right? That's
What's the
a good
criteria?
question, yeah. What's the criteria that by which that may is evaluated? I'm fine with the language of may. I mean, how do you foresee that being evaluated, Chief? And do you think it's clear enough here somewhere?
Cause right now,
Well,
B leaves all the
I think,
discretion to the
you know,
division captains.
Oakland PD or whomever PD, a specific person says, I'm investigating whatever that is, and wonder if you have that, and it hits on that license plate.
How is that
The-
not a specific criminal investigation though?
That is a specific criminal investigation.
So why can't we use the specific criminal investigation language? In other words, what's the scenario that is official law enforcement purposes or permitted by law that is not a specific criminal investigation?
I don't know, maybe a missing child or something.
That's right. Well,
So
sure.
I could see it not being a
Yeah.
criminal
Mhm.
investigation, huh? It's not a criminal,
No.
it could be, so you could have a missing kid or something like that.
Or a missing person
Yeah, a person.
who has a car.
But that's not a,
It's not a
So you're
criminal, there's
searching a
no
missing
crime
person?
when
Yeah.
the kid's
You're
missing.
looking for
yeah,
that
that's
car.
not a criminal investigation unless there's
Unless there's
a
allegation of
kidnapping.
kidnapping or
That's
someone
right,
having done
or-
something
or-
to the
yeah,
kid.
or-
I mean, a runaway, for example, or like you said, just a missing person, somebody who's has Alzheimer's and is wandering around the street would not be a criminal investigation.
Correct.
But it would
So
be a
it's-
legitimate.
So your question
is what
was,
is the only
your
the
question
problem?
is what's the,
So if you take only out, I mean, if you take that only and you use an either or kind of thing, for legitimate law enforcement purposes or in specific criminal investigations or in connection with specific criminal investigations, whether that or allows you not to be the only and allows you to do both, right?
Yeah,
Whether
I-
it's criminal or not criminal.
Yeah, and I guess the question I'd ask, because right now it leaves it up to the police department's discretion to hear the purpose and decide whether they want to release it or not. But I'd be
I think it's
interested
made it
in,
broader.
are there, and maybe you have some sense of it, are there areas that people are concerned about the police releasing it for?
Well, and there's also.
I mean, and if so, what are they?
the areas that I've heard as the chief here locally and in general are, number one, don't release aggregate data to any big databases, and number two, don't release anything to ICE. And
That's already
that's
prohibited.
I'm just saying. And
Yeah, no, I'm
I
saying
feel like those are
included,
covered.
right?
There are law enforcement agencies in the Bay Area that work with and collaborate and share information with us.
I don't know who those are. I
Union
haven't.
City for one.
You saying it doesn't make it so. I don't know
It's
of
in the
it,
newspapers.
and that doesn't make it so. So I don't know.
Well,
We don't.
It
And my
is
point.
known.
Okay, this is the Berkeley Police Department policy. I am responding to the idea of what are people concerned about, and they're concerned about those things. So releasing aggregate data and sharing information with ICE.
What I'm saying is that what people want is a firewall in the policy against sharing information with a law enforcement agency that may not be operating in good faith.
And
I
what I'm saying.
understand that there may, I
But-
understand that may feel uncomfortable, but that's
No,
what people are
it's not,
concerned
it's not a
about.
meaningful standard to
That's-
say
yeah,
good
it
faith.
just-
That's
it-
the problem. I mean,
Well,
to
if
say
you
good
say
faith,
a specific criminal
but
investigation.
no one can determine in a
then
police
you-
officer that another
then you
agency
require
is,
some proof.
okay, but is operating in good faith or not. That's a
Yeah,
completely
it-
100%
Well,
subjective
because
standard.
It
you
prejudges
asked
the-
for a specific criminal
Okay.
investigation, otherwise you are leaving things entirely open.
Well, then if the,
I'm not sure that-
if that police
I don't-
officer or that police department is asking, is behaving, is acting in bad faith, and the Berkeley Police Department fails to take that into consideration, that's a much bigger cookie to think. I'm a little bit hesitant to incorporate language who somehow infers that another police department or another in the following of a criminal investigation will act in bad faith and then
Well,
involve the Berkeley Police Department to do
I
so
will
as well.
say for a fact, you know,
I-
you
I-
can't control access to ICE unless you put in some kind of a firewall, that's the reality.
Okay,
So
so
if you want that policy to be meaningful, you have to do something.
can I ask what the language is on immigration? I know I saw it earlier, Chief, but I'm
Oh,
just
it's
sort
in
of
here, but
confused.
I disagree with that
Yeah.
statement.
Well, we know
Okay.
Union City does it. I mean,
Okay.
we
I,
have public records to
I
prove it.
respectfully disagree with that statement.
They do. They
No,
admitted
not that
it.
statement, the statement that, you said something about, anybody sharing anything goes to ICE, you just made a statement about it.
No,
And
I said that there are law enforcement agencies in Northern California that cooperate with ICE. We have the public records to
That's-
demonstrate it.
I was
But that's
And I'm
not-
saying that
okay.
it's difficult to control
That's,
whether
okay, yeah.
data that you provide gets to ICE unless you put in some kind of a firewall that demands that it be a criminally based investigation and not just any request.
But the concern here
I
is-
actually think a criminal investigation would not at all prevent someone from.
That's right,
sending it
because
to
that's
ICE
a bigger
because-
threshold, that's a
because
much bigger
it-
threshold.
You know, most of the people that ICE are looking for, there are criminal charges which could be brought against them.
I think,
In-
No,
in
the
most
reality is
instances-
the
No,
only
it
ones,
doesn't-
the only
it
ones that
doesn't
aren't,
prevent it 100%.
the only ones that,
That's
the
the-
only ones that
It's
aren't
civil.
are people,
Mhm.
right, who
We
are
saved the
overstaying.
public comment for the end.
Essentially,
Public-
overstaying,
It's a subcommittee.
other than overstay,
The
they
subcommittee
all
makes
fall
it
under
okay?
criminal
The
statute.
subcommittee has different rules
So-
of engagement by community members.
So, but in any
I see.
event, to get
But
to
we're
back to
gonna
our
move on.
thing,
Because
That they're part
we're
of
not
the
in a,
committee?
we're not in
can
agreement
I
on the
just
language
ask
change.
one small question about, just so I can just see where our immigration language is, all right?
so it's in, it's specifically in 1302-9.
I know, I read it.
Where policy 415, which is our
Oh,
immigration
right,
law
yeah.
policy, is, says,
Yes.
which covers
Oh,
that, yeah.
you got it.
Yeah,
Right.
that's covered.
Right, are sharing is subject to provisions in BPD program, or may not be shared with federal
Yeah.
immigration enforcement officials. Okay, is there,
You guys can
is
put in
there a,
restrictions on it.
the only
It's
thing
part
I
of
would say, and
information
and I'm
sharing.
definitely ready to move on, is if there is a way to incorporate that same language into the,
422.
422.
Okay,
That's
so
it.
13, you're just saying right now, 1302-9, the sentence
Yeah.
in the first paragraph about ALPR data, can we put that somewhere in 422, is that what you're
Yeah.
saying?
Sure.
Alright, so where do you think we're gonna put it?
Why don't we put it right underneath where we say or is otherwise permitted by law, cause it's the same language, so basically at the end of 422.7 preamble, basically.
Permitted by law, using the following procedures, you mean there?
No,
Is that
right
gonna break
before,
that
or maybe you put it, just put it before then. Make it the first sentence of releasing ALPR data.
I would actually, just for flow,
Or put it at the end.
put it at the end.
Yeah.
And so I think that, it could be added to the final paragraph under 422.7.
That sounds good.
Sure. Cool.
Okay, so there'll be some duplicative language, but that's okay.
Yeah.
So moving on to 422.8, any issues?
22.8. This came out of the old policy, right?
Mm-hmm.
I have no issues with this.
I think you skipped 422.6.
Let's do 422.6.
we had some questions about, there was like a 90-day rule, I remember, or
30 day, there's
30
one-
days, yeah.
There's
Are
a
we
365 for metadata and 30 days something. That's on 422. Yeah, that's on. That's
sorry?
on
What's the
422.5a. Yeah, you're talking about collected
422.
images and metadata of hits will not be
Yeah.
stored for more than 365.
Yeah, I just asked, I'm just curious what the reasoning is behind that, not that I'm necessarily opposed to it. I sort of just think sometimes, oh, why would you delete data which might, be exculpatory or something?
Yeah, I'm not sure why they do that, but I know that
422.5a, and this was the question I had at the commission.
a minimum of 1 year.
It says, it says collected images will not be stored more than 365 days, and metadata will not be stored more than 30 days. I didn't really understand why the limitation.
Well, one is hits, right? So the first sentence refers to actual hits where there's a violation. So there'd be the interest in holding the data for a longer time. I think the second one, metadata of reads, a read is where it sees it, recognizes it, but there's no violation. And that's not transferred to a server, that's not held for more than 30 days. See the distinction?
I
So
understand what you're saying, but you could write that a whole lot more clearer, because
Okay,
everyone I've
alright,
ever
so
seen
we'll
looked
do
at it is confused by it.
Okay, let's.
well, I think it's a
let's see.
definitional thing.
Let's see this.
Yeah.
So it says collected images and metadata of hits.
I mean,
Will
you
not-
should talk about the storage for non-hits and then the storage for hits, because they're different.
Okay, collected images and metadata of hits.
I think it's
Will
reads
not be
without
stored for
violations.
more than 365.
And it may be collected images and metadata showing violations
Okay.
will not be what's that will not be? Will be stored for at least 365 or will not be stored for more than? Because we're sort of trying to say
Will not be
the
stored for
year.
more than 365,
Will not be stored for more than 365 from a year.
yeah.
Metadata of reads without violation.
Why is that? Why would it not be stored for?
I would do the short stuff
can we-
first.
can
Well, I think
we-
it just, I
I
think
do
it's
the short
conducive
stuff
to
first.
most
I
things.
just wanna ask, I was just, no, sorry, go ahead.
Because most of the, because if you look at all the data that we're talking about in different aspects of general
Yeah.
orders in the police department, there's a year for it, there's a 30, 60, 90 day, as well. So I think it's just in line with 365. You think it's too short, you think it's too much?
No, I don't know, I'm just trying to understand the reasoning.
Admittedly, this is a little
behind.
bit speculative, but I would
Yeah.
imagine it has to do with keeping records about parking violations.
Yeah.
Okay.
So you think for a year?
Yeah, well, parking violation, hold it for a year, and then I'm very sure that the metadata of reads without violations will not be stored for more than 30 days, and images of the reads will not be transferred to the server. That's saying, that's telling you
Not
that
holding
that the
on.
unit in the car or whatever, not car, but that's saying we're not holding on to those non-violation
License
reads,
plates, I
and we're
see.
not uploading them to the server. That's my understanding of that.
Okay,
Right.
I get it.
And the proviso is I'm not
No, I
totally in the
understand.
weeds on these systems, but that's.
Can you separate those into an A and a B? First of all, there's no B right now, and
Yeah.
two, that would make it more
It
clear.
might be helpful to say, this is what we'll keep for 30 days, this
And
is
this
what
will
we'll
keep
keep
it for
for not more than
365.
365.
So
Right.
A will be collected images and metadata showing violations will not be stored for more than 365 days. And then B would be metadata of reads without violations
Yes.
will not be stored for more than 30 days. Images of reads will not be transferred to the server.
Right.
Sound
Well,
like-
yeah.
So I'm okay. So let's continue to move because I
Yeah.
am on a time limit and so are you,
Okay.
right? I have to be at 7:00 in
Okay.
San Leandro, and traffic will kill me. I have to be there as a vote. If I'm not
Yeah.
there, I will not be part of the vote.
Where is it?
This is your pen. Yes, my pen. So where are we? So if
We're at
everything right with data
422.8.
collection
I have
and
no issues
retention,
with 422.8.
so we are fine on accountability and parking and scoff law enforcement. You have no question. Oh, we did accountability already. And
Yeah.
no, we went to
No.
release ALP data. We
Yeah,
didn't
you
look at
skipped.
yeah, we didn't look at accountability. So is that what you want to say?
No,
We skipped it.
I was just saying you skipped 422.6.
We skipped it,
before,
4.6.
So now you need to look at it.
We need to look at it. Yeah. I like the login
Well,
password
you got
protect system.
E is pretty restrictive, so
Yeah.
there you go. That actually covers the blue language that you were talking about before.
Yeah, I think so.
It says aggregate LP data not related to specific criminal shall not be released to any local, state, or federal agency without the express written consent of the city managers.
Yep.
Okay. I'm gonna push back slightly on the specific criminal investigations, just to state to you that, for example, the Northern California.
But we can do that on
Regional
public
and-
comment, because we, as a subcommittee, we're trying to push through
Okay.
to the end.
But
So
the
I'm
NCRIC
sensitive.
standard to access the statewide database collection
Yes.
is a specific criminal investigation with a case number.
Ah,
So if NCRIC won't release the information to a law enforcement agency, I'm not sure why you would insert this sort of local loophole.
Could you tell me exactly what language you're looking at? It's a loophole.
I'm telling you that the NCRIC policy, if you wanna access a license plate,
Right.
is that you have to provide a specific case number for the criminal investigation that you are pursuing,
Okay.
and they log it and they audit it.
Right.
And I'm not clear why you would be handing out ALPR information that they couldn't get from the statewide database on a lower standard. In other words, that's how the entire license plate sharing for all over the state of California regionally works. You stay outside of Vigilant, which is the disaster area. But those are the federal standards that
So-
NCRIC uses. You can't get it, cause Berkeley gets information from NCRIC.
So
You
you-
can't get it from them without a specific.
I understand when
Case
you
number.
log into NCRIC that you have to give a case number that they audit it. And what I hear you saying is we should have something similar if we are providing if someone asks us for information.
Yeah.
So that could be that we amend 422.7A and add under 3 something like including that agency's case number or some sort of that they have to provide a case number. If
That
we
would be
did
good.
if we did that, then
Yeah. I mean, I'm not sure how that's different than specific criminal investigations, like. sure.
well, I'm trying to understand. I am trying to really understand your concerns and to see how they're addressed. And so,
I think a case number would be a reasonable metric.
it's not it's just a piece of information that if somebody said, hey, Joe from this other agency got this license, tracking it back, something bad happens, malicious actor, they track back, where did they get that? And it comes to us, it's like, well, the person identified themselves as the police department, we gave this case number, therefore we gave them the information.
That would make me feel better. I mean,
Yeah,
in
it's
terms of a standard,
it's
if you can live with it.
it's a speed bump, yeah.
Okay. Are you ready to vote on this one?
I'm ready. With all the discussions that the chief has taken into consideration and all the possible changes that we've done, we're confident that that's a great working document on 422.
Aye.
I mean, so those will translate to 1302 somehow, right? Is that what we're saying?
Right.
So pretty much, the work on 422 will translate to 1302 with whatever changes are applicable for both of them. And then we will have that come back to us, probably, chief, hopefully, a little bit more of a window,
Well,
so that,
I wanna get back to you fairly swiftly.
Yeah. so that we can review it ourselves offline and not have a conversation that's
So,
wrong act.
I wanna be
but-
careful about,
So it goes to the commission.
So 1302, there's some red line which will likely accept as changes. We are gonna copy that language over into this. I don't have other changes in 1302.
Neither did I.
And 1302 appendix, I don't see red lines, so I'm gonna feel like in previous conversations, there's not a request to amend language. So we feel like we're good with 1302, the
As-
changes.
As long as,
it's not inconsistent with.
Right.
422.
that's right,
Right.
as long as there's anything on any of those two that it's contradictory to 422, we
So we'll keep
and
these
then we'll-
keep these as a package.
Yeah.
and hopefully, I mean, cause what will make it really, I look at Sergeant Team and I go, oh no. Hopefully, well, because she has a lot of things to juggle here, I mean, this is not the only thing she's dealing with. It's a lot of other
That's correct.
policies as well. I mean, hopefully we'll have a line of tracking of what we discussed here. So when we are at the commission level, we can present a very strong case of what we did. And push it forward to city council. So, thank you, Chief. I know this
Thank you.
takes
Thank
time
you.
out of you, and
Yeah.
appreciate it. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you.
Thank you for adding all those languages, it's important.
Yeah.
I mean,
Thank you.
well,
It's helpful.
you did a lot of work for us, that's good.
Yeah, I did some work for you guys.
Yeah, that's
Thank
good.
you, though. Thank you for letting me,
No,
for letting me attend and make comments. and
Subcommittees,
I'll continue
subcommittees
through
are
the
different.
process.
Some
Yeah.
committees are different than the commission because it's a little bit more conversational.
I remember I was
Yeah.
on a subcommittee
No,
once,
yeah,
remember?
yeah, that's true.
I
Is
will be again.
there any other public comment? Seeing that there's none, we adjourn at 5:39. Thank you, everyone. Thank you,
Thank you.
Sergeant, so much.
Thanks.